Good morning. I just want to thank everyone for joining us on today's conversation about the power of networks. We're recording the session to share important insight and strategies on how multi-stakeholder networks can address the climate crisis. Our focus today is on how these networks can drive just, equitable, and pragmatic solutions for the climate crisis. I'm Sophia Pessagno, the Operations Director for the Southeast Climate and Energy Network, also known as SCEN. At SCEN, we're about bringing together organizations, communities, and experts specifically in the Southeast to create solutions to tackle the climate crisis. Our network of over 70 organizations throughout the Southeast is positioned to confront the climate crisis by creating strategic alignment, growing capacity, and building power amongst our member organizations and the communities in the Southeast. Networks like ours play a critical role in ensuring that our members learn, adapt, and pivot when necessary, as we push for more just, equitable solutions for the climate crisis. Today, I'm excited to be joined by an incredible panel of experts who will share their experiences and insights on the power of networks in action. I'll let them introduce themselves before we dive into our discussion. Sierra, do you mind going first, followed by Michael and then Alex?
Not a problem at all. And thank you for having me. Greetings and sun salutations. My name is Sierra Taliaferro. I am the Community Outreach Associate for the Environmental Protection Network in Region 4, or the SCEN Southeast is what I like to call it. And I am here based in Fort Lauderdale. Thank you for having me.
Hi, all. Michael Dexter. I'm Director of Federal Programs for the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network, a network of local government, peer-to-peer network of local and tribal governments from across the Southeast. Originally from Sarasota, Florida, I'm actually currently based in St. Louis.
I'm Alex Easdale, Executive Director, Southeast Climate and Energy Network. As I adjust the camera so y'all can see my awesome SCEN shirt here. And Michael, a couple of things already in common with the both of you. So Sierra, we're neighbors. I live in Sunrise, Florida, which is the Fort Lauderdale area. So we can actually go out and have lunch together, which is very rare in today's world. And Michael, my dad lives 30 minutes from Sarasota. So we got to talk. But in any case, thank you, Sophia.
Awesome, thank you. Well, let's jump straight into the conversation then. So from all of your experiences, what's the value of networks? What are the different types of networks? And what has been your experience with working with multi-stakeholder partnerships? I know that's a big question. So whoever wants to go first.
I'm happy to jump in and go first, if that's okay. Again, Sierra Taliaferro, Environmental Protection Network. And I think the value of networks is really this expanded approach of subject matter expertise in different fields of subjects and experts, of course. And I think for me, one of the ways that I kind of compose networks is kind of based in kind of themes. So we have like the federal and the national level, which always comes to me for like WEJAC and NEJAC, which are these advisory councils for the White House, but really focus on environmental justice initiatives and concerns. And then it also kind of dives down into like the more regional perspective, which is someone like EPN or SCEN, RTI, which is the Research Triangle Institute and the Deep South Center of Environmental Justice. So those, regional tic-tacs. And then that state and local level, like USCN, SSDN, and then lastly, really those grassroots community level organizations and other networks like Thriving Earth Exchange and Black Sustainability Inc. All of those different networks work in so many different ways, but always have the same thing in mind, which is really supporting the community. So that's kind of what I think the value of networks are and what some of those different types are in that regard.
I would absolutely agree with you. And at SSDN, we are a peer-to-peer network of local and tribal governments, roughly 125 across the Southeast, with over 40 in Florida. And honestly, one of the areas in which we most focus on is that there is a connecting thread between all these communities. Really, there's a shared experience of working in the Southeast where sometimes the subject matter, oftentimes the subject matter is very difficult to work on, and there's varying levels of institutional support. And so really that's where, building off of what you were saying, we really like to have that, not only the shared experience between all of these local governments, but also work within these sort of other nested networks, I would say, where they're both at the regional, national level focus, but all the way down to the local level. And one example that I would actually provide is in Florida, we have so much great activity going on at the local level, everything local and regional level, whether it be the compact or whether it be like county sustainability teams. Pinellas County has a great one. And that effort can really distill up not only to the regional level, but the state level, particularly in an organization such as the Florida Sustainability Directors Network that we support and that's voluntarily run by local government officials in Florida. But those communities can also learn from their region because there might be connecting threads between what's happening in Georgia, what Mississippi or Louisiana or Alabama are facing, to what is being happening in Florida. And so that's really where we look to scale that to the region and connect it with another level of networks. Not only that, but building on what you're saying about the multi-stakeholder partnerships, that's really where I think it's also really beneficial to be working outside the scope of just local government. And so while we really support this peer-to-peer connection among local governments, we also work very closely with organizations such as SCEN, EPN, and others that work across the Southeast and across the nation to really advance sustainability.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm very happy that I get to go last year. I think we can continue this trend. It'll be very easy for me today. So I don't need to repeat what all y'all just said. You made my life easy. But to your question, Sophia, the power of networks, if you will, in my opinion, number one is trust. We've built trust over years. And Michael, we talked about, I was in Climate Week a few weeks ago. I saw, your executive director, Meg, at multiple events and other folks, and you kind of see the familiar face, whether in Zoom world or in person. We're involved at every level, from national, even international, especially regionally here in the Southeast and all the way down to the state and local levels. On the tapestry that Sierra described really well, I think is very interesting because we get to do a lot of different things, even to the point to where in my community, I've participated with the Broward Compact. So is my wife. We've helped with sustainability plans here. You understand? So it's really cool to watch it at the multiple levels and multi-stakeholders. So I think, let me just make a quick distinction though. A network and a coalition, for example, are often confused. Networks are much wider in scope. There's disagreement among different members, if you will, of a network sometimes on specific issues. Clearly different groups do different things. We have everything from forest protection to groups that work on, protecting rivers and waterways, to groups that are hardcore advocacy and other groups that, try to promulgate, at the policy level, if you will. The coalition tends to be a lot more narrow in scope and this broader agreement. So I just think both are important, but managing a network, in my case, for 8 years now, it's the art in it is very interesting because we have a similar vision. Sometimes it's disagreement as to how to get there. But I do think, I'll just say this one more thing. Business as usual right now, these approaches, and I saw that, in Climate Week, I've seen it in some fora. We're going to COP in a month and a half. Some folks are taking the business as usual approach, and that's just not going to work. That's the definition of insanity, to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. And I say this because I'm sitting here with, Hurricane Milton headed towards the state of Florida. Again, I saw John Morales, basically lose it yesterday. I've been watching him for over 20 years. He's a meteorologist from South Florida because he's terrified. And this is on the heels of Helene, where we still are far from recovery in multiple states. So I think the value of networks is very, very important. And I'll just give one final quick example. We're not a disaster response organization, if you will, right? However, the minute this hurricane struck, especially since it hit 5-6 states in the Southeast with significant damage, funders, many of our members and so on, immediately saw us as a go-to organization, and we've been able to raise money from foundations, but also from individuals. We raised over $15,000 from individuals, which we then re-granted directly to those communities that are impacted. And this is very important. We're not FEMA, we're not the Red Cross. We're working with groups on the ground that know these communities. And in some cases, it's very hard to reach areas. So I'm finding that we have a niche here where we can provide real responses in a quick way, in a very effective fashion, with groups that we trust, because there's also obviously scam artists and different things that happen. So hopefully, I know I'm a little bit all over the map there, Sophia, but this is a very good question. And I'm just a huge fan of networks. So thank you.
Thank you so much for all those wonderful answers. Building the second question on some of the responses that I've heard. So I know we have different ways that we support our members individually as networks, but I just wanted to dig a little bit into the difference between technical assistance and capacity building. And then in addition to that, who are the best contacts for technical assistance within our networks? How do we use resources like the ERA's Tic Tacs and grant makers to fit these organizational needs? Michael, if you want to go first.
Absolutely, would be happy to. So to start out, SSDN, or the Federal Programs Division of SSDN, really started to provide capacity building, information awareness, and to help communities access federal funding. From at that point, it was even pre-bipartisan infrastructure law days, largely in response to the ARPA, or American Rescue Plan, state and local fiscal recovery funding that communities were looking to see how they could utilize for sustainability goals. Well, with not only the bipartisan infrastructure law, but the Inflation Reduction Act that you mentioned, that really helped shift us to realizing there was a lot more opportunity in helping deepen our level of support for these communities. We felt that, and we heard from our communities, that they were looking for additional levels of support that just were not available to them at the moment, largely around grant writing, largely around technical assistance on how to actually put forward a competitive application, and recognizing the requirements for many of these new and evolving grant programs. And so that's really where SSDN went from this sort of capacity building, informational awareness approach to really building out a technical assistance team that looks to get working in conjunction with these communities, help them become more competitive for funding and to manage the funding that they are fortunate enough to receive. So whether it's our federally funded technical assistance efforts through EPA's Multimedia Environmental Finance Center, or newly efforts under the DOE National Renewable Energy Lab ETIP program, or our direct philanthropic level support via the local infrastructure hub and the BASC program, we're really working in communities themselves to help those local government officials access this funding, put forward a competitive application, and then manage the funding that they are actually fortunate enough to receive. So it really does affect how I would say the peer networking works, because we develop such a greater extent of awareness of what communities are doing, that becomes a much more efficient way to help connect these peers, to recognize that, two communities are dealing with the same issue for the same grant. Let's connect them so that they can more efficiently talk with their project officers, learn from others' experience, and really help to improve and expand the capacity of these communities to manage funds that, in many cases, they would not otherwise have an opportunity to do so. And so when it comes to working or looking at the opportunities for technical assistance out there, I will mention that there are quite a few opportunities from the federal agencies for federally funded technical assistance efforts. That includes EPA's Environmental Finance Center, or as you mentioned, the regional Tic Tacs or Thriving Community Technical Assistance Centers. For those, I'll actually push it over to EPN, who I know is very familiar with those, but I'll also speak on the EFC side of things. That's really where we want to come and help your community make the best use of the state revolving funds and other water utility and other water efforts out there. And so if there are any questions, we highly encourage you to reach out to us, email me directly, go to our website. You can find resources around the EFC, what we provide, and what services we can really help. So you can make the best use and put forward the most competitive application or prepare for funding as it becomes available.
And yeah, I'm happy to echo some of that. I think one of the things that's very important to realize is that lots of communities and sometimes in the work with others, they tend to be silos. And I think for networks and community connectors such as ourselves, we see these connections and these gaps, and we just want to make sure that we can fill in those gaps. And I think that's a really big, important aspect of being a value service provider in some scope. But especially with the Environmental Protection Network, like Michael mentioned, we definitely interact with a lot of the Tic Tacs across all of the US EPA regions and US territories as well too. And like mentioned before, the TIC-TACs, the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, I know it's a tongue twister, but it's definitely something that we urge people to definitely tap into, as well as other local networks as well. But essentially, those TIC-TACs are really like a hub and spoke model of partners that really help to deploy technical assistance at the community level to help support like other climate and other environmental justice related projects and initiatives. But it's really each TIC-TAC is really comprised of different types of partners that have been designed within their own hub and spoke model in some capacity. So it's a really valuable network that we really want to make sure that communities are connected to, because they have a broader outreach of resources that can be useful in a lot of the projects that they're doing as well too. And just to kind of go off of the question that was asked, how I look at technical assistance versus capacity building, I think of technical assistance as customized support. It's really just like being able to curate the type of support that those communities need to be able to match them up as best as they can. Whereas capacity building, in my definition, of course, it's really being able to fill that gap and that need for sustainability, really thinking about that long-term game, that long game approach. Because sometimes it's not one and done. Sometimes technical assistance, it's just like one-time approach. Whereas capacity building, it's thinking about the long game. Like, how can we make sure that you are resilient as a community that sets you up for success, for sure?
Yeah, once again, very happy to go last. This is wonderful. Last time I tell that joke, but it's for real. So the distinction between capacity building and technical assistance is a very good one, Sierra. I 100% agree. I see it as, well, it's a gray area, first of all. But I do see capacity building more in the sense of organizational development. And we've been involved in doing both more capacity building, if you will, for our member organizations. Let me just break it down real quick. So we have 75 plus SCEN member organizations across 11 southeastern states. We actually have 2 groups now in Puerto Rico as well. We're looking to expand our networks in some states where we're kind of low in membership, like in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Virginia. We're actually very strong in the remaining states in the Southeast and growing. So we provided, since I've been with SCEN, we provided, and my predecessor as well, Rudy Navarra, did a great job in finding resources for our members, both in two forms: capacity building, technical assistance, if you will, and in cash. So we've been able to re-grant over the years, well over $1 million. I've also gone in front of bigger funders and said, okay, give our organization X amount. I'll tell you, my biggest ask ever was, because they told me what I want, I said, all right, give our organization $5 million, and let's multiply that by 10, and let's do $50 million for the rest of our network. And they didn't flinch, but of course gave us significantly less, but they gave us a good amount, and we were able to re-grant a lot of that money directly, or they granted our members directly. So in terms of like the importance between those two things is hugely significant to be able to contribute, and as a network to be able to help our grassroots member organizations. Over 50% of SCEN members actually are organizations that have the very small. Some of these are maybe have one base in their communities. You understand? So they need. We've seen $10,000 grants that we've provided to some of our members. You know, they multiply that to 100,000, if not more, and what have you. So I definitely see a very, very important role for SCEN and for networks like ours to play in terms of funding and capacity building. And and one more thing that I want to say is in relation to federal funding and the IRA. These opportunities are going to take time. Let's be clear: the U.S. is still the largest oil and gas emitter in the world, even under this administration, okay? But for these projects and this fundamental transformational change, if you look at the infrastructure bill and then the IRA, it's gonna take a minute, okay? So I think being an active agent within that, being very proactive but patient at the same time, I think the change is coming. I have an optimistic view of what the future can be. Walkable cities, light train, light rail, you understand, public transportation connects to rural regions and what have you. So I think we have a very important role to play. And in particular, we've submitted multiple applications, or been part of multiple applications for IRA funding through the EPA and the DOE. And our partners, we've kind of figured out that the best role for us, our niche, is the outreach function. because we can reach communities and community leaders, and through them partner with an SSDN, with an EPN, right, who kind of have their niche and their own network, and then kind of fill out that tapestry, if you will, for things to actually happen. But I do believe that we need community leaders, we need community-based organizations to be very much a part of this, even at the design level. So again, building upon the great answers of my colleagues, and I hope that I've answered your question, Sophia.
You sure have. Thank you so much. So building upon that, there's obviously a lot of successes in our networks, and I just want to point that out. So my next question is, can you talk a little bit about the strategies that you've been a part of or experienced through your network, including responding to negative impacts and how networks respond appropriately to legislative and other losses? Alex, could you go first since you've been going last?
That's right.
Repeat that question.
Yeah, of course. Can you talk about winning strategies that you've been a part of or experienced, and just a little bit about like negative impacts and how the network has responded appropriately to legislative and other losses?
Yeah, well, again, there's, the reimaginers, the reformers, the resistors, if you will. We have all of them in our network, and I think sometimes you have to fight and get to the street. And I say fight in the sense that, go out there and protest, if you will, show, force in opposition to certain things. And I think many of our member organizations and the climate movement in general, I think, has done a pretty good job of that. Coupled with that, I think we've worked well, getting in different rooms and talking to different folks in power. Again, you mentioned our mission at the beginning, Sophia, and I just wanted to, there's the element of capacity building, but there's also the element of power building that I think is very, very significant within our work and within our mission. And I think we live that. And I think part of that is understanding that sometimes you're going to lose. Sometimes, there's going to be horrible policies that happen. Sometimes, you have a campaign that just doesn't work. For example, end single-use plastics here in Florida. We've not been able to pass that legislation yet, right? However, there are wins. DEQ passed, was forced Duke Energy to clean up coal ash sites throughout North Carolina a few years ago. And that effort was really led by grassroots organizations in North Carolina. And behind that were Sierra Club and SCLC, which is the Southern Environmental Law Center. So that was an example of a very, very positive and winning campaign, because the grassroots led, and the bigger organizations that have much more resources and a specific role to play followed, but enhanced what they were doing. So I think, what we've seen throughout the years is we've seen different organizations promote different strategies and things that have worked in the region, and then we share those in our working groups. We share those and we convene our network again in person once a year, and then we have another convening that's virtual. So we've been able to kind of build upon each other, help each other, and I think those conversations are extremely valuable, because obviously if I figured out how to do something here, like, it's not a cookie cutter approach in a sense, but we could take that and apply it to in Alabama, for example, and kind of tailor it to the reality in Alabama, and then figure out how to win there. So I think that's a very good example of, and there are many others of our network that we've done just amazing things.
I'm happy to jump in too. I think I love the different types of winning strategies, but I think it's also important to also highlight some of those negative impacts as well too, that networks have responded to, because to be honest, it's not always sunshine and rainbows as much as we want it to be. And one of the ones that definitely comes to mind has been the Sackett versus EPA case, which was it was a hard hit for wetlands across the nation's waterways. And if you're not familiar, if those are not familiar with the Sackett versus EPA water case, it's really about the health and equity of the nation's waterways and how the Supreme Court was interfering to weaken the Clean Water Act. And so in the midst of that, with understanding that when the Sackett case come out, what can the network do to not only make a stance about the policy that was put in place or what was ruled, but also how to support communities who are really working in those different avenues. So that's really like understanding, well, what does this mean for communities, and breaking down those logistics and jargon to turn it into lay language so that people can understand how this directly or indirectly affects them as well. And putting all of our efforts, especially as a network composed of former EPA alumni, we really tap into our network to use their expertise to engage in these conversations as well. So I think that's also important to not only highlight the good things, but also sometimes there are bad things that happen too in this work. And how do we become resilient to make sure that it's not something that bogs us down, but propels us to keep us going forward, to make sure that we're doing the work that we need to do.
I couldn't agree more. Certainly not rainbows and sunshine always in the Southeast. And honestly, I think that actually makes, in many cases, for a stronger network. And that's one of the reasons why we have built this trust between the different networks, and we have been consistent stakeholders or consistently working in these communities. It has really helped build that connection with them and recognizing connection between themselves. And so when we work with a lot of our local governments, I mean, they will say that sometimes it feels like they're taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And those challenges can be very disheartening. But being able to share that challenge with someone else in your same state, in your same region, that has faced that same challenge, but maybe find that narrow path in which to overcome that obstacle, it can be so rewarding. And so that's where when we look at not only experiences with other stakeholders in the Southeast, but in particular with our local governments, we really see this camaraderie based off of the shared experience and shared challenges. And one of the reasons that our network exists is that when they might go to a nationwide conference, they might not necessarily be able to fully understand the position that a community from California might be in, or from Illinois. And so they really have developed this work with themselves and this ability to connect with each other in a way that really shares that those shared challenges and helps overcome it. And so as we look to sort of build off those losses, I would say that has really helped to foster even more trust, not only in the network, but in each other. And so I think when we look at sort of the models for successful strategies, one thing to sort of make this more applied for some federal grants, I will say that similar to how Alex was talking about many of the local CBOs, many of our local governments are very much capacity constrained. We do have obviously several members that represent some of the largest metro regions, counties, and cities in the Southeast that might have staff numbers that are in the double digits. But for far too many, or for many of our communities, it might be a single individual that is taking on the entirety of the sustainability efforts in that community. And so when it comes to pursuing federal funding, pursuing the advantages that come from the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, they really inherently need to look outside to partnerships to really be able to leverage capacity to really truly succeed. And that's one area that I'm excited to see the sort of growth of local government and community-based organization partnerships, particularly for federal funding. Now, we recognize that we don't want that to be the only reason that there is a partnership, but certainly that has been the opportunity to incentivize communities and bring people together that might have had historic animosity for a multitude of reasons, or might not have been able to work together for a long series of time. And so having that serve as the opportunity to pull people together and really work towards a collaboration really means that regardless of whether that federal funding opportunity is successful in the long term, it has built that capacity, it has developed those relationships that we hope will prove even more dividends than that grant may have provided.
Michael, I couldn't agree more. I was trying not to give you because that's very important. I think there's been so much emphasis with these grants that are focused on collaborative partnerships, right? But if we really have to think about what I want communities to do is think about the long game. This is got to think about the long-term approach, that even though we have these grants now, that sustainable partnerships that you build with coming together for these grants can have a longer lasting impact for the work that you're trying to do. So yes, all of that, I wanted to echo that.
Yeah, I agree. That was very strong. And I think a couple of related points. One is we can't, as far as federal funding and what have you, we cannot just continue to fund the usual suspects. I think we have to go with organizations and projects that are a little bit out of the box, a little bit different. I think sometimes you need to take good calculated risk because the results might be way beyond what you expect. So I think I really want to just point out on that. And the other thing is we need to involve, I'm loving what you said, Michael, and I agree. And we've been talking about this, connecting local governments, if you will, with CEOs and community leaders. We need the private sector. So we need the private sector, not all the private sector, but there are a lot of companies, a lot of businesses trying to do things right. And in my experience, and in our experience, a lot of people don't know what to do. Over 70% of the population in this country, and probably more than that now after these hurricanes, is fully aware and in agreement that climate change exists. The scientific community is almost unanimous in pointing this out. This is not a partisan issue. This is not it should not be a political issue. I hate that they're politicized. Some people are politicizing this right now. This is an all of us in this together kind of issue, and it doesn't just involve humans. It involves the entire planet, all living species, and we're so blessed to have this beautiful planet and be a part of it. And I think we need to just fundamentally shift the way we view resources. That mechanistic worldview needs to move on, needs to be part of the past. Regenerative economies, you understand, circular economies. We have solutions already to really do this, and it's just a question of getting about doing it. And this also involves, managing power sectors and all of that. But I think, again, I'm an optimist, and we're working very hard to make this happen. But that was really a great answer, my friend.
Thank you to everyone. It's amazing to hear. Just each of you guys have said this, but we are more powerful when we work together. And I absolutely love that. We are starting to close out, so I just wanted to leave an open space for anything that we might not have touched on, but you want our viewers to hear. Not necessarily that you need to talk, but if there is something that has been left unsaid, now's the time to do it.
I'll double down on something, and then I will not be the last to speak. So I think a couple of things. I got to give a shout out to coalitions and groups that we're a part of here in the state of Florida. And speaking of networks, there's a very strong local network in Miami-Dade County called the Miami Climate Alliance. And they're part of our network, if you will. They participate and work with us. But they've done an amazing job. And I think they have a model that's very replicable because they make a lot of noise and they lobby governments down to the city council level to make good policy decisions. And I think that's crucial for us to win. So I think that's the one thing. And the other thing is we need to be more creative and be more out of the box and get out of our silos. Even if our silos now are within a large movement, if you will, we need to talk to our neighbors. We need to talk to individuals. We need to help people become engaged and activated in this movement and in helping our planet, because a lot of people, a ton of people are, and they just don't know what to do. They think they recycle and they don't take a plastic bag at the store and they're helping. And that helps, but I think there's a lot more we can do. We could do community-wide composting. We could do the community solar. We could do so many different things that some are doing, but not evenly across the board enough. So I think when you show people solutions and proof of concept, even in the South, I think others, they see something better and they want it. So I'll end it with that. And, we generated this panel. I'm very, very happy, Michael and Sierra, for you joining me. And Sophia, amazing job in facilitating. So thank you.
Perfect. And I'll just jump in just so you're not the last to talk as well. But I would say for the local government perspective, again, look to just get involved. And so with the local governments, even if you might not have a dedicated sustainability or resilience official, even if you have that as some element of your interest, the communities that are part of our network and part of the freely run FSDN network, really it spreads a gamut. You can be a public works official, you can be a community planner, you might be from the public utilities, economic development, or you might be a chief resilience officer. But it really looks to help support communities from rural up to the largest metro regions and metro communities. So again, no matter what community you are in, if you have any interest in this, whether it be energy efficiency, whether it be equity, climate, or resilience, don't hesitate to reach out, talk with your peers, talk with us, or connect with anyone on this call or any part of this panel, because we can all help provide connections to communities or people sharing your same experience, and that can help you to advance your local sustainability initiatives. And so, again, really just want to serve as a resource out there, and happy to have my email added to this and shared with the conference attendees. But again, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I'll just say that, again, it's been a pleasure being on this panel, and looking forward to continue working with both SCEN and EPN. As a former EPA official myself, or EPA staff myself, really enjoy the subject matter expertise that EPN brings. And SCEN, I really appreciate everything you all bring as this coalition and network for organizations that spread the gamut from SSDN to many other types of organizations. So again, really just appreciate being invited here. And if anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
I don't know how I can top any of that, but just truly to echo a lot of the things for what both Alex and what Michael has mentioned, it is really about connection. It is really about being creative with the type of work that we can do, not just across the South, but also just in the state of Florida. Because if there's anyone that needs that resilience, it's definitely us down here. And just wanting to make sure that we can connect as many people that we can, from the grassroots level all the way down to all the way up to the federal level, of how we can make sure that this works for everyone and that no one is left behind in this movement to sustainability and environmental justice. So again, happy to touch base with communities or other individuals who want to connect and learn more about our organization. Happy to leave my contact information as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sierra, Michael, and Alex, for all of your powerful insights. Thank you everyone for watching this recording, for joining us today during this important conversation. Networks like ours are essential for driving real change, and we hope that the ideas shared today inspire future collaboration. Together, we can ensure that our efforts lead to meaningful and just solutions to the climate crisis. Thank you everyone for joining. Bye.